Welcome to the SoapBox podcast, where we will focus on putting what you do and how you do it front and center. We'll be spotlighting entrepreneurs, artists, nonprofits, and more. So sit back, get comfortable, and hear all about it.
Welcome to the SoapBox podcast, where our focus is to have an eclectic conversation where we spotlight entrepreneurs, artists, nonprofits, and more. Today's topic, we will discuss the quiet talk, my menstrual cycle, with Dr. Renyta Scales. Dr. Renyta Scales is a current pediatric resident physician at Duke University Children's Hospital. She was born and raised in lovely, gorgeous Prince George's County, Maryland. She graduated from Oxon Hill High School in 2012 and further pursued education at Lincoln University of Pennsylvania. In 2016, she graduated summa cum laude, which interprets valedictorian, from Lincoln University of Pennsylvania with a degree in biology and minor in Spanish. She continued her education at Pennsylvania State College of Medicine, pursuing her doctorate degree, graduating in the midst of the COVID pandemic in May 2020. Prior to graduation, she dedicated herself to the study of infants, children, adolescents, and young adults, and desired to pursue a career in the field of pediatrics. She was accepted to Duke University Children's Hospital as a pediatric resident physician. She currently enjoys providing care to preterm and term infants, as well as managing reproductive health concerns in pre-adolescent, adolescent, and young adult stages. Please help me welcome Dr. Renyta Scales. Welcome, Dr. Scales. How are you this evening?
Great. Thank you so much for that lovely introduction.
Great. So today we will have a conversation with Dr. Scales, as she provides us with an overview and importance of being prepared for the onset of a girl's menstrual cycle, the what, why, and how of the natural change in a female's reproductive system. We're not going to start with giving too much questions just right off the top, because what if you didn't have a Dr. Scales to have this life-changing conversation with? Over time, I've spoken to friends and heard their stories of how this long process was explained to them. Take a listen here at Maria's story. Maria said, when I was 14 years old, my cycle started. I was at school and I got up to go to the bathroom. And when I got to the bathroom, I saw blood. I cried because I didn't know what happened. I was thinking, did I harm myself or did I cause harm to myself? I was never told about my menstrual cycle at home. I do recall taking a class at school, but all that I'd learned in class was out of my mind at that moment. I asked my best friend, what do I do? She went to the nurse office with me, and the nurse told me it was going to be okay. I was afraid to go to school the next day because I was embarrassed. My mom went and got me some pads when I got home, and that was it. Never told or taught me about my cycle or how to properly clean myself. Being a mom of a daughter, I made sure my daughter had the proper education product when her cycle emerged. So, Dr. Scales, please inform our audience on what a menstrual cycle is.
So the menstrual cycle, really, many people know it as a period, and it's really just a time when our bodies have been exposed to sexual hormones, and particularly for females, that's estrogen, and it really is all a part of the process of being able to bear a child. And so we go through this process each month where our bodies are preparing for a child, getting ready, building up that home that the child will live in. And if a child is not introduced at that time, then we shed all of that, and that is basically what a period is.
So is it important for young ladies to understand this, or parents and guardians to have a discussion about the onset of their menstrual cycle?
Yes, so it's really important for parents to have discussions about it. Young ladies really, this is such a significant time in their lives, and just kind of one of the first times that they're experiencing something different with their bodies. So it's really important for parents and guardians and even doctors to make sure that the child knows what's going on and is prepared for when it happens.
Right, and that's the biggest thing, because like listening to Maria's story, you know, just being in school and not know what to do or kind of in that position to panic, and luckily her friend knew, let me take you to the nurse.
Right.
So that was a good friend to have at that particular moment.
Mm-hmm.
So what is the normal age for a young lady to start her cycle?
Yeah, so we typically see most girls starting their cycle about 12 to 13 years. But just in terms of puberty, girls can kind of start the process of puberty between 9 and 16 years. So sometimes we are seeing cycles a little bit earlier or a little bit later than those like 12 to 13-year age ranges. And one thing I do want to mention, too, is that with overweight or obese girls, we do see earlier onsets of their periods.
Okay.
Yeah.
So that will trigger. So starting probably about the 4th grade,
right,
all the way up until, what, the 10th grade maybe?
Yeah, 10th to 11th grade.
Oh, wow.
Yep.
Wow. That's a large span. Are there any warning signs for girls or parents to start the conversation?
Yeah, for sure. So one of the big things is really just when you start to see puberty occurring, that is a classic sign to say, hey, this discussion might need to happen sooner than later. And one of the first signs of puberty is really breast development. So if you're starting to see your child, or if the young lady starts to notice like, hey, my breasts are getting a little bit bigger than what they were, and I'm starting to see like hair in my private parts, these are signs that, your body is starting to produce some sexual hormones, and it's start time to ask those questions about, like, how do I take care of myself in regards to the period occurring? And for parents out there, typically from breast development up until the time that your child has their first cycle is about 2 years. So once you start to see breast development, you should expect her period to come within 2 years.
Oh, wow. So that's really good to know.
Mm-hmm.
So once you start to see those quote-unquote warning signs, then start getting ready to have those conversations with the young lady.
Exactly.
So they won't get sidetracked while they're in school or maybe out hanging out with their friends,
mm-hmm.
and it just appears.
Right.
So that's really good. That's really good to know. I'm pretty sure it's good to know for the girls, and it's good for parents and guardians to know that information,
mm-hmm.
especially if it's your first child.
That's for sure.
Yeah. That's a really good key point. So we're going to move along to another story that was sent to me. This story is from Adrienne, and Adrienne actually started her cycle when she was 12 years old. She got her cycle at 12 years old during the summer while preparing for middle school. She said her mom always talked to her about sex and getting her period. So she provided her books like Our Body, Ourselves, as well as Hello, God, It's Me, Margaret. She told me how to track my days, how I had my little purse in which I kept a pad and wipes. So I was really prepared, right? She said, whoa. So the day I got my cycle, it was a normal summer day. I was home with my little sister and my father, who happened to be off that day. Had a strange feeling. My stomach was achy. I felt something was dripping, and things just did not feel right. I went to the bathroom, and there was the red stain in my panties. Even though I was educated, I was scared out of my mind. And, of course, I could not tell my dad. My mom was unreachable. So I felt embarrassed and ashamed. All of my teaching was gone. After I got myself together, I went to where my mom kept her maxi pads and changed my panties and placed the pad exactly the way I was taught. I felt that I was officially older and that I was ready to conquer middle school. I was just excited that I did not have the moment that most girls have, coming on your period in school and the entire class knows. Overall, after initial shock, it wasn't that bad, so I can only hope and pray that my daughter is able to have a similar experience. And so we already know the importance of parents talking to girls about their just life in general, boys, but in this case, girls, just in life in general. So is there a way that you think it would be more appropriate for parents to have those conversations, or some topics for them to get started?
Yeah, so I think sometimes it's really easier to just have the conversations when the topics are being brought up. So one key thing I do know, at many of the well child exams, we typically do make sure we're looking at breast development, we're looking at pubic hair or hair up under the arms. And so those are also a really good time that once you leave the doctor's office to be like, hey, Dr. So-and-so was taking a look at all these locations. These are some of the reasons why. She's trying to see, like, where you are in terms of puberty and also when your cycle will start. So, like, let's talk a little bit about what that is and what that means for you. And I think, too, even when you're in those beginning stages, like when her breasts start to develop and you decide that you guys need to go bra shopping, making that a special moment and also bringing up the conversation there would be a really good thing. I think sometimes just using the moments where the topic has already been brought up can be a lot easier and relieve a lot of anxiety and frustration for parents to try to find like this special time to have this conversation. And honestly, I also think, when you're having this discussion, the best things you can do is just normalize it and also share your experiences. This really creates a safe space for the child and just kind of builds this opportunity for them to be able to come to you later on when there are other things going on too.
That's some really good pointers. And that way it reduces the anxiety for parents trying to figure out the when to start the conversation or the how, because that just makes it more, at that moment, makes it more personable and making it more connecting to the situation. So if I don't even, have these signs and symptoms and my mom's talking about it, when I'm 7, and then when it happens when I'm 12, it's just like, what? I remember her saying something, but I was playing outside when she was talking about it. So that's a really good segue to help parents and guardians to have that talk. Once they leave, like you said, the doctor's office or when you go bra shopping, that would be a very good time as well, just to kind of at least start the conversation and not make it as awkward or weird, because that's not a conversation a lot of people enjoy having. And so do you think if it's not properly discussed, there are psychological effects on a girl, how she views her menstrual cycle? Like if a parent doesn't have that proper conversation with you?
Toiletry and Company serves as an epicenter for personal health and hygiene products for individuals in underserved communities throughout the world. Those in need suffer the greatest loss without having basic daily personal care products. Our goal is to educate, supply, and distribute personal care products to the homeless, veterans, domestic violence survivors, and youth communities year-round. We would like to express our sincere gratitude to the community for helping with our annual fundraisers and donations to the organization. Our motto is love, hope, and soap. To learn more about our organization or to donate, please visit toiletryandcompany.org today.
Do you think if it's not properly discussed, there are psychological effects on a girl, how she views her menstrual cycle? Like if a parent doesn't have that proper conversation with you?
Oh, for sure. So I think a lot of times if your child doesn't know what's going on with their bodies, and a lot of times the other kids aren't really talking about it at this age either, so they'll really start to feel like they're different or abnormal or weird or something's going on with them that's not normal, or like everybody else has the same thing happening. And that can really kind of present itself if your child is like an early bloomer or a late bloomer, because they feel like they are one of the outsiders and not getting what everyone else gets. So I think, just having the conversation can really be helpful just in letting her know expectation-wise, and also just understanding like it can happen at any point. And, that doesn't mean that you're abnormal or different. That just means that that's your body and that's how it plans to respond. I also think, too, just in terms of psychological effects, if you don't have those conversations, like you'll have a lot of issues when she's not prepared, her not having the supplies ready to go, her not knowing exactly who she can go to if she's at school, whether that's like the teacher or the nurse, or her feeling like no one's ever told me who I can go to get resources or ask questions. So I think those two things are like really big in terms of psychological effects that just later on in life, can be really prevented if you just have the conversation with them and try to normalize this process as much as possible.
Right. And so that brings me to my next story, which it seems like this mom must have spoken to you. I mean, of course, you weren't born at the time, but she had some conversation with the doctor or just, being prepared as a parent. So this is Alicia's story. And so Alicia said, when I was 7 years old, my mom noticed that I was starting to develop breasts. She took me to the doctor, and he told her that I was beginning to go through puberty, and it was just a matter of time before I would begin my menstrual cycle. That very day, she sat me down and told me that I would get my period every month and described what I would go through. She pulled out a sanitary napkin and showed me how to use it. She also asked me to show her how I would put my pad on in the event that she wasn't around. We practiced once a month. If I got my period in school, I was instructed to raise my hand and tell my teacher that I needed to go to see the nurse and ask for a sanitary napkin. When I was 10 years old, I ran home from school, dropped my book bag on the couch, and went to the bathroom like I did every day. This particular day, I was different. I looked down into my underwear and saw something. I screamed excitedly, "Mom, I got my period." She said, "You know what to do." I took a shower, got fresh panties, and a pad on like I practiced so many times before. Thank God the flow wasn't heavy or that it didn't happen in school, but nevertheless, I was prepared. Thanks, Mom. So everything that you just said, to prepare your daughter, her mom did exactly that, which made her have less anxiety or going to your peers to, either get misinformation, wrong information, or just get totally embarrassed because she was prepared. Right. And so that's really, really, really good information for people to have an understanding of how just being prepared will help you. So when that child gets into that situation, they're not going helter-skelter, they're not embarrassed, or people don't tease them. Because that's the other thing, get bullied or, start being called a name because you didn't know what it was and you're walking around with soiled pants or skirt that particular day. So do you have any recommendations for personal health and hygiene during this time? And what should a girl do to maintain proper personal care when she is in her cycle?
For sure. So one of the key things just in terms of personal health and hygiene is really just making sure we're having a good frequency of changing the pads. So what I would recommend is about every 4 hours we should be thinking about changing the pad or changing a tampon. And one of the biggest reasons is that bacteria just grows on anything and everything. So if you're sitting there, even if your flow isn't super heavy, you really just want to make sure we're keeping that area nice and clean, and also just making sure we have fresh pads or tampons in those areas. The other thing, too, is if you're planning to do any type of exercise or be in the hot weather or if you're having heavy flow days, you may need to adjust that frequency and do it a little bit more often than that every 4 hours just to, make sure that we're keeping that area clean, and then we're also just preventing bacteria growth within the pad or the tampon. And, one of the personal things that I typically like to do is just in between pad changes is using wet wipes. I think that can really make you feel refreshed. So always feel free to, just keep like a small pack of wet wipes at hand just to have them just to, all the time you can't take a shower. So just having those to just make sure we're cleaning really well down there is really helpful.
That's very good advice. Very good personal health and hygiene advice for young women, especially when you begin the onset. You're already prepared knowing this is what I'm going to have to do during this time frame. And I actually did have another question I wanted to ask you. Is there typically like a length of time that people have their cycles? So is it like from 1 to 2 days, 3 to 7 days, or is that also like depending on the individual?
Yeah, it can be very individual dependent. Typically, most people or most females will bleed between 2 to 7 days, and then we'll have about 21 to 45 days in between where there is no cycle. For our adolescents, it is normal for the first 2 years after your first cycle for it to be irregular. So you may have like some weeks are a little bit longer than others, or you may not necessarily bleed every single month. And for the first 2 years, it's really your body just getting used to the process of like releasing an egg and shedding things that build up in your uterus. So all of that is, within the range of normal.
Okay. That is so good to know. Dr. Scales, this has been very informative and very educational, and hopefully this topic can help girls, parents, guardians, to be able to have an intimate conversation with their daughters or their nieces or someone that they're mentoring, just to make that conversation of this lifelong journey as a woman and your body changing a little bit easier and not as anxiety prone, just to give us that to say I can have this conversation as a parent or guardian feeling embarrassed, but I can also have this conversation with the girl for her to be prepared whenever her cycle presents itself once puberty starts. So I would like to really thank you for joining the Soapbox. We were glad that you were able to stop by. Before you go, let me ask you one last question. This answer could be anything. I know this to be true.
Okay. So I know this to be true is that everything happens for a reason. So for those of you who are listening out there, whether you have a daughter, whether you are a teenager, whether you may not have any kids and have nieces or nephews, or whether you're a grown man who may have some cousins or siblings out there that you may think that needs to hear this information, you know, there was always a reason that you were here. There was always a reason that you heard what you heard today. So please, you know, feel free to share this information so that everyone can stay well informed and just be prepared for what life brings to us.
Thank you, and congratulations on doing your residency at Duke University. I wish you the best of luck, and I know that you're going to do an awesome and amazing job in the field as a pediatric doctor. So thank you again, Dr. Scales.
Thank you for having me.
Thank you for tuning in to this month's Soapbox. We hope that you were introduced to something new, learned something you can share, and come back for our next episode to gain additional knowledge. In the meantime, stay connected with us on Facebook at Toiletry and Company, or check us out at toiletryandcompany.org. That's toiletryandco.org. As our mission is to provide love, hope, and soap to the universe.